Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Sasanyavadi Paschatya Dasatarine. We are continuing to speak about specifically now the role of women in this series of classes on the roles of men and women. And yesterday, Shruti Kirti reminded me of something that Prabhupada said to a reporter. And Prabhupada was explaining the difference, one of the differences between men and women. And the reporter was probably a feminist and wasn't so happy to hear what Prabhupada was saying. But Prabhupada was talking about women being protected. And as I said yesterday, she asked, well, do they have to be married? What if they want to be single? And Prabhupada said, but then the men will get you pregnant, and then you'll either have to have an abortion or you'll have to get on welfare. So the men are actually exploiting you in the name of women's liberation. So Shruti Kirti reminded me of something that I forgot to mention that Prabhupada told the reporter. In explaining why women need protection or how they need protection, Prabhupada said, a 16-year-old boy could travel all over the world and he wouldn't have a problem. But a 16-year-old girl couldn't. And of course, you might say, well, that's because the men are so degraded in Kali Yuga. That's true. That woman would be, most likely would be exploited, or at least the attempt would be made to exploit her. And less likely for a boy, and a boy is also more able to defend himself. So maybe we could restate that. A 16-year-old girl could not travel around the world. It would be dangerous unless she was a black belt in karate. And even then, that might not be sufficient. So anyway, you understand the principle, the difference in mentality between men and women, that men have this very strong tendency to want to exploit women. And you see that in the world of prostitution. A lot of, you know how many girls become prostitutes, they leave home. And they get picked up by a man who shows them more affection than their parents showed them, and then employs them as a prostitute. Less likely to happen to a man. So they're, you could say, women are in a more vulnerable position. And so, you wouldn't, I think we would intuitively understand if a 16-year-old boy goes off somewhere traveling by himself, it's not going to be that dangerous, most likely, but if a 16-year-old girl goes off by herself, so we understand it's going to be dangerous. We wouldn't want her to do that. So that's just another example of the concept of protection of women. And as we said a few weeks ago, sometimes men misunderstand the concept of protection. And so instead of protecting, in the name of protection, they try to control or exploit. And I was saying that if a man is going to protect a woman, then a man has to be very strong. He has to be emotionally very strong, centrally very strong, strong in Krishna consciousness. And that's how he protects her, by his stability. We see, it's not a criticism, but I see that women sometimes, maybe it's hormones, maybe it's nature, whatever it is, have more become more emotional generally than men. Not saying that men don't, but generally we see that. And so if a man is stable, that gives stability to a woman. If she is up and down hormonally or emotionally, and he is stable, that's very good for her. That's a kind of protection. If she is indecisive and he's decisive, that's protection. If she's not clear on something or doesn't understand something and he understands it, that's protection. Or if she needs physical protection and he can give it, that's obvious protection. So I just wanted to bring that up. And now we're going to continue reading. And this is a conversation. It looks like a conversation with a reporter. The reporter asks, could a woman be a temple president? Prabhupada, yes, why not? Glad to hear it. Prabhupada, it's a woman reporter. Her name is Mrs. Wax. Prabhupada, but because women are less intelligent, they should remain dependent on first-class father, first-class husband, and first-class son. Now, this is interesting. Because Prabhupada's saying they can be temple president, so you would think, if you're going to be temple president, you require some intelligence. And then he's saying, well, they're less intelligent. So it couldn't mean that they're not intelligent enough to run a temple. He's describing less intelligence as something else, which we've described. Women should remain dependent in childhood upon the first-class father, in youth upon first-class husband, and in old age upon first-class son. Women is never independent. If she becomes independent, her life is not very good. She must agree to remain dependent on first-class father, first-class husband, first-class son, 3 stages. So, and here is what Vishaka says. A first-class man is a man of integrity, kindness, courage, spiritual commitment, and maturity. That women can be temple presidents but must also remain dependent on such a man may appear to be a contradiction, but Srila Prabhupada doesn't see it that way. From what he says here, women should remain protected and do a service they're capable of. That women should be protected does not mean that women are forbidden from speaking, singing, managing, or leading. Let's take a closer look at protection. As I think it's really important. You don't understand, what are they being protected from? Well, they're being protected from their own frailties, but in Kali Yuga they're being protected from men who are supposed to protect them. That's the problem. So it's like a double problem in Kali Yuga. As things become degraded, not only do they need protection from their own weakness, they need protection from men who would take advantage of those weaknesses. But it doesn't mean that women don't have strengths. As she's saying, it seems like a contradiction. Prabhupada's saying less intelligent, but you can be a temple president. But protected from the chances of being exploited by men. And generally, women want to have that kind of protection. It's natural. They like being around men. It's just as men like being with women, and men like women and women like men, because women have qualities men don't have, which men like. Men have qualities women don't have, which women like. What is protection? Protection, like everything in Krishna consciousness, is ultimately meant to help one advance spiritually. This is a letter from Prabhupada. Protection means what? Your protection idea is very limited. You want to be protected for a few years, but the protection of Krishna is perpetually. You are protected. Jakladeham punar janma naiti. You don't get any more material body. That is real protection. Yes, so this is a good point. Protection means ultimately to protect our spiritual life. Here, in speaking about the traditional culture of India, Prabhupada explains what ultimate protection is. Krishna mare ke mare Krishna rake ke. That person whom Krishna wants to protect, no one can kill. And that person whom Krishna wants to kill, no one can protect. As Prabhupada said in the room conversation quoted above, what can the father, husband, or son do? Ultimately, Krishna is our protector. So, I mentioned yesterday something that I think is interesting for this discussion, where Prabhupada said that women don't have to get married, or when a husband would leave a wife, then Prabhupada would say, well, just make Krishna your husband. Why do you want this husband of this world? So, in one hand, he's giving kind of the material formula, women should be protected by father, husband, and son. And now he's saying, but who can really protect you? Only Krishna can protect you. Apparent contradiction. So Prabhupada is shifting from the material concept of protection to the spiritual concept of protection. Does it mean he's throwing out the material concept of protection? Not entirely, but to some degree, because he's saying if a woman wants, she can remain single. She doesn't need the protection of a husband. Krishna is the real protector. And if she has that faith that Krishna will protect her, she'll be protected. Still, at the same time, Prabhupada said if single women are living in our temples, then the leaders should take care of them, protect them, just as the leaders should take care of the men as well. So there's a balance there. Here's a letter. Women must be protected, and it is the duty of the leaders of our society to see that this is carried out. Protected against what? Protected from the men who want to exploit them. And then protection spiritually means we'll give them opportunity. If I'm a leader and I think my job or one of my job descriptions is to protect the women, that means I have to give them equal facility to Krishna consciousness, equal facility to sadhana, and equal facility to serve according to their capacity. Equal to what? Equal to any other devotee in ISKCON. So I can't say, as this happened once, we can't say, no, you can't chant here, only the men can chant here. Then they're not getting equal facility. Prabhupada didn't like that. He was really upset when the devotees did that. And here Prabhupada's saying women can be temple president. Some men say, no, this is wrong, they shouldn't be. But that's not what Prabhupada said. So equal protection means facilitating. If somebody is qualified to do something, you facilitate it. You say, okay, let's facilitate. Let's create facility for you to do this service. That's what Prabhupada is telling the leaders here. So protection is not only physical, but the spiritual aspect of protection is facilitation. Now, something very interesting to note, that in our movement, women were always given the best facility to go on Sankirtan, because Sankirtan was so important. And also Sankirtan brought in finances, which were absolutely necessary. And the women were usually as good or often better, or maybe always better. Anyway, they could compete with the men on book distribution. And so no one ever had any problem facilitating women on book distribution. No one ever said they shouldn't go out. But sometimes if a woman were given a position in management, some men complained. So I find that's a little bit interesting, where we're certainly willing to facilitate them in book distribution. Deity worship also. But in management, men don't like to be controlled by women. That's a fact. But here Prabhupada's saying they can do it. He didn't say they can't. But one time, at least according to Jamuna, Prabhupada did not appoint her to be GBC, but he wanted her to be GBC. But Prabhupada said he felt it out, and he said the men won't accept it. So there is some credence for this idea that, you know, if a woman's in a position and a lot of men just have a difficult time with it, that maybe it's better she doesn't take that position, even though she's qualified. So, you know, you can blame it on the men and say it's their fault. That's fine. But you don't want to put a woman in a position where the men are going to give her a hard time because they don't want her in that position. So sometimes that happens, and that has to be taken in consideration. But in the ideal world, what Prabhupada's saying is protection goes materially and spiritual protection means facilitation for the service that you're capable of doing and that you want to do. And that's needed and you can do well. So Vishaka says, we can't minimize women needing protection. The #MeToo movement is evidence that sometimes some men are out of control and so unqualified that they force themselves on women. Women need to be protected from such men. And the most effective way to do this is for women to serve in the association of Krishna's sincere devotees. I was telling in another class, I believe I was telling in another class how when I was temple president there was a brahmachari who was flirting a bit physically with women in the kitchen while they were cooking. And the women were so disturbed by this. They just came to my office demanding that this person be chastised or thrown out of the temple. So I chastised him, but somehow or other, he was so conditioned, it didn't go through. And again he did it, and they came to my office and they were so angry because they felt that they weren't being protected because we were allowing this man, although I didn't know how bad it was. Eventually we solved the problem. But it showed me how much women are offended by lusty men and how much they, by nature, want and need to feel safe in an environment, in a temple environment, feeling safe knowing, and in every environment feeling safe knowing that these lusty men will not approach them, will not disturb them. So that's obvious need, it's a natural need, and as a leader of a temple, that's another duty he has to perform. He has to protect the women from any men who potentially could exploit or misguide them. Sometimes that does happen. Some big, strong, apparently advanced devotee bewilders a woman and lures her away and then engages in illicit sex with her or runs off with her. And whenever this happened, we never saw Prabhupada blame the woman. We always saw Prabhupada blame the man, because the man is the aggressor. And so Prabhupada always put the blame on the man. The man is meant to be the protector. The man is meant to be more intelligent. And so the man uses that so-called intelligence to exploit a woman. And Prabhupada understanding, he said something to the effect that the women are more innocent. And so the woman's thinking, well, here's a man is a protector, the man cares about me. She doesn't understand that he's actually trying to take advantage of her. So thinking, well, here's a good situation, here's a man, maybe we could get married, but his intention wasn't to marry, his intention was to exploit her. But she didn't understand that. So Prabhupada, he said, well, women are innocent. It's not, they wouldn't always understand that. They would think the man is a devotee, he's responsible. He's a devotee, he must be responsible. He's advanced, he must have my interest in mind, but sometimes that's not the case. And therefore Prabhupada always blamed the man. It's his fault. Never blame the woman when these things happened. Because the man is meant to guide the woman. The woman's meant to be protected. And here a man doesn't protect her, it's his fault. It's not an excuse for women to say, well, I didn't, if I run off with a man, what can you expect? But Prabhupada's point was that it's not what a man is supposed to do. And it's his fault if he does it, even if she goes along with it. It's his fault because he shouldn't have done it. And he shouldn't have wooed her away, bewildering her, thinking that he had her interest in mind, and that he's an advanced devotee, and whatever he's saying and doing is what Prabhupada wants. And we've seen that sometimes men take advantage, and they try to convince a woman to do things that she shouldn't do in the name of, I'm a man, or I'm a husband, and that you should follow me. So that's, then again, we're back to this point where women need protection from men who are exploiting them. So this is this unfortunate reality of Kali Yuga. So then Vishaka goes on to say, when in such an environment, this environment where men will exploit women, in such an environment, women fully use their... Wait, let's go back. Women need to be protected from such men. And the most effective way to do this is for women to serve in the association of Krishna's sincere devotees. When in such an environment, women fully use their talents and proclivities in Krishna's devotional service, their absorption is another form of protection. So this just underscores the point that if you are a leader, be you a man or woman, you facilitate everyone. And that's how you protect both men and women. Leaders protect them by facilitating them. Because when you have service, that's the best protection. I've seen this. This is interesting. I mean, we know this. But I've personally seen that devotees who live at home and work, a lot of them don't have any service because they're not in a temple or near a temple. And often they ask me if they could do some service, and I have many things that I need done, lifetimes of service. So I give them some service, and they write me back and they say, this service is helping me so much. Because instead of wasting time after work, now they have to do their service. So, yes. Okay, so let's read on. This is a letter. This is from a lecture. It's 1975 on the Bhagavatam. Women should always be protected. That is, protection does not mean negligence. No, protection means to give him, he means her, excuse me, all facilities. That is protection. So just, again, making the same point. You know, this problem, this universal, perennial problem, you give someone power, you give someone authority over someone, the tendency to take advantage and exploit comes up. And even in well-intentioned people, when they're put in a position of authority, sometimes it goes to their head. And so in a sober society, the association of men and women is always restricted, because only in a proper environment within a marriage is a man given the authority, I don't say authority, but given somewhat control, that's not a good word, but just for the sake of this discussion, control of a woman, but within the contract of taking care of her and protecting her. So otherwise, there's a very strong tendency, as we know, when you're given authority to exploit, and a very natural tendency for men to want to exploit women sexually, because biologically that's just how men function. Therefore, there's the marriage institution. And within the marriage institution, if you want to have sex, you have to do so many things. You have to take care of your wife, you have to make her happy, you have to take care of the kids, you have to provide for them. So it's not just you get a girlfriend and have sex and then leave. That's what it's become in modern society. So, you know, if you want to have sex, you have to take care of the woman, protect her, provide, and so forth. That's the way it's supposed to be. And that naturally curbs the sexual tendency and the tendency to exploit, because there's a context in which so many other responsibilities are required. Otherwise, you just go on the street, meet a girl, have sex, and that's what's destroying young boys and young women, young girls. That free sex, it's totally destructive because it's irresponsible. And so there's no protection, it's just pure unadulterated lust. That's it. And that is the problem. Lust is the problem. Lust is the reason we came here. And if we don't overcome lust, we're going to stay here. And we're going to take another body to fulfill our lusty desires. That's basically why we have a body, is to fulfill lusty desires. And so we have to be able to purify those desires, and the strongest attachment is to the opposite sex. So within that environment, we have to learn how to purify it. And so for the man, taking care of the woman, protecting the woman, is part of how he purifies himself, and also necessary for her, and to create a proper relationship that's spiritually advantageous for both of them. So now she lists some ways that Prabhupada protected women. This will be interesting to read. So the Prabhupada protected women by educating them about their true identities as spirit souls, engaging them in devotional service, a process by which they could attain liberation from death and rebirth, the ultimate protection, and when limited facilities were available for the devotees' use, giving them a due share of those physical resources. In India, for example, Prabhupada would ensure that his female disciples had proper transportation, prasadam, and sleeping facility. Why? Because the men always didn't do that, because they weren't really acting as men. They were young, they were immature, and they tended to look for, take better facilities for themselves, thinking whatever they're thinking. I imagine thinking that the women are not important, or the women are lesser, and they therefore don't deserve better facility. But Prabhupada did the opposite. He gave the women the better facility. At least equal, but if there was a question that there wasn't good facility for everyone, he would give the good facility to the women. It's interesting that Prabhupada did that, but it didn't, what's the word? I'm trying to think of it. It didn't trickle down, yeah. It didn't trickle down to all the leaders. Well, he's doing it, but they're often doing the opposite. Not every time and not always, but definitely it was done too much. Or you could say, done once is too much. An immature man may feel threatened by a woman who has a voice, intelligence, ideas, or any other form of power. Such a man, in the name of protection, may actually commit violence if he discourages, denigrates, or prevents that woman's chosen devotional service. Protection is not about denying someone service based on the body in which he or she has appeared. That would be repression or oppression and would cause only distress. Rather, protection means providing a safe place from which one's protege can perform her service. So she's making the same point I'm making, and I made this point the other day. That one of the problems we see inside ISKCON and also outside ISKCON is that some men, they want to keep women in a subordinate position. So therefore, if a woman is capable, whatever it may be in any area, if it's an area, well, not in any area, but if it's an area that they feel is a man's area, they get threatened. It makes them feel insecure and uncomfortable that there's a woman who's more qualified. So let's say, for example, a woman gives a class, and she gives a better class than you, and you're a bit of a macho man. That does not make you happy. That threatens your sense of self, your sense of self-esteem, your personal pride, because you think women, or all women, are supposed to be less intelligent or less than you, and here this woman gave a better class. So that is not Krishna consciousness, and that's a problem. And obviously, Prabhupada would not ask us to subordinate women just so we could keep our egos intact. And if you're a man listening to this, and this describes you, then I would say that's a problem. If you're threatened by a woman, that's a problem. If you're threatened by any devotee, it's a problem. You should be happy when another devotee does nice service. You should be happy when another devotee is pleasing Prabhupada. If it makes you unhappy, if another devotee is pleasing Prabhupada because they're getting the credit and not you, or it makes you look less capable or qualified, then that's something you should consider as a problem that you need to work on. Because until we become happy to see other devotees outdoing us, we're not really very Krishna conscious, whether it be a man or a woman. You can make the excuse, well, it's a woman and women shouldn't do A, B, and C. But I think you should be honest with yourself and just say, it's a problem. I have a big ego and it's a problem. And I'm not saying, someone might say, so are you saying there are men who say women should have different social roles in ISKCON? Does that mean they have a big ego? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if a woman does some outstanding service, perhaps better than you, and that bothers you from a sense of making you feel inferior, that is a problem. The two issues are different. Some men feel if we're going to establish Varnashram, Daivi Varnashram, we should establish certain traditional roles, and one of those traditional roles would be the role of woman. And it's not necessarily they feel threatened by women, they just think socially that would be the best thing. Okay, that's fine. You can create Varnashram, and you can create those social roles for women, and those women who want to be in that kind of society, and there are many, I'm not denying that, will join your communities. And I would never say that you are putting women in that position because your ego is threatened. No, I understand. There are devotees who really want to establish Varnashram from A to Z, and women taking a subordinate role to men is part of that. But at the same time, we see that Prabhupada didn't do that. He gave women all kinds of roles. So for the preaching mission, that is necessary that women step up to the plate and do whatever service they're capable of doing, as long as the men don't go crazy. And then we have to ask the question, if they do go crazy, why are they going crazy? Is it justified or not justified? So I think it's an important point for men to consider. If you see a capable woman and you're saying, no woman should be subordinate, they shouldn't be in this position, is it just your false ego? Or are you actually concerned about establishing Varnashram? And if you are, then you would want to create a Varnashram community where women would appreciate being in those roles, and they don't want those other roles. And they would be very happy in that community, but if you try to force that on women who want to be out in the world, spreading Krishna consciousness, achieving things, that won't work. They'll be very unhappy. So that's, as far as I understand, that's the balance. I see you have questions, but let me read a little more. Often, capable women who want to offer service in the Hare Krishna movement are not encouraged to do so. The movement is a poorer place for having lost out on a wealth of abilities. Some service. We can't say all service, but they're discouraged to do some service. And this is not good. No one should be discouraged if they're capable. If you're not capable, we might discourage you to do something you're capable of. But if you are capable, then generally we would allow you to do that unless it created some social problem. Women are one of 5 groups that in a traditional Vedic society require protection. Such protection means acknowledging value. We protect what we know is valuable. Prabhupada writes in Bhagavatam, in the glorious days, or before the advent of the age of Kali, the Brahmins, the cows, the women, the children, and the old men were properly protected. I don't know if I mentioned this, but it's very interesting. You've probably heard this. These are the 5 classes of people and animals that are protected. And it's kind of obvious that we protect the elderly. Every society does that. And protection of the Brahmins just means to support them, facilitate them so they can teach, so they don't have to go out and work all day, because they're capable of teaching, and that's what they should do. So protection means society makes sure they can live comfortably so they can do their service. And mothers, naturally, does it say mothers here? Brahmins, cows, women. Okay, women. So let's discuss women. later. So we have Brahmins, we have cows. Of course, we understand why cows should be protected. That's obvious. Children, obviously should be protected. Old people, obviously protected. So then, we understand, I think this is very clear, when we talk about protection of Brahmins or cows or the elderly, nobody thinks of exploitation, right? I think protection means service. So then women are part of this group. So these living entities, Brahmins are not, they're not weak, but there is a vulnerability. And the vulnerability is that if they engage themselves entirely in Brahminical work, they wouldn't be able to live because they're not asking for money for what they're doing. The Brahmins cannot charge for their work. They can only subsist on donations. So there is some vulnerability there. And cows obviously are vulnerable because they're defenseless creatures and humans can kill them. And elderly people may be vulnerable if they're physically or mentally handicapped. Not all elderly people actually need protection. Someone was just telling me of some devotee who's, I can't remember who it is doing phenomenal preaching and service, and I didn't know he was 82 years old. We were all shocked. So it's not necessary that elderly people need protection, but at some point, some of them do because of physical or mental handicaps. So that's obvious. There's a vulnerability there. And children, obviously, a vulnerability, naivety, and so there's a certain vulnerability that women have, and that's why they need protection. And it's not I think when we see these vulnerabilities, there's a tendency to denigrate. But you don't denigrate Brahmins because they're vulnerable financially. And you don't denigrate elderly people because they're vulnerable physically or mentally. And you don't denigrate cows because they're vulnerable to be slaughtered. But somehow or other, because women have certain vulnerabilities that men don't have, they get denigrated by some sections of devotees. Isn't that interesting? Who denigrates Brahmins or cows or elderly or children? Sometimes children maybe, but if anyone denigrates children, we would all think, what's wrong with you? They're just children, what do you expect? So we should see it the same way if anyone's denigrating women. Like, why are you denigrating women? It's just, there's a natural vulnerability that they have. So what's your problem? That's just you should, if you can protect them because they have a vulnerability, that's what you should do. That's all it is. So here she gives a description of what this protection means. The protection of Brahmins maintains varnashram, the most scientific culture of attainment of spiritual life. Without Brahmins, the whole society just goes to hell. And every time I look at a problem in society, I always go back and say, if there were Brahmins, we wouldn't have this problem. The Brahmins would not allow this to happen. If there were, Donald Trump has created so many problems, but if there were Brahmins, they would have never allowed him to be elected. And if somehow he finagled his way into election to become the president, they would have just pulled him out. And they said, no, not this guy. This guy is going to create a mess. That's what Brahmins do. They protect people. And so if you see any problem, like the problem with social media, the problem with our smartphones and other devices, we know there's so many problems and distractions. The Brahmins, they probably wouldn't even have allowed smartphones and social media to even exist. They would have just said, no, forget it. You will just use this for unlimited prajalpa and criticism and degrading yourself. Let's just make this illegal. Forget it. Steve Jobs, I'm sorry to tell you, your iPhone has been nixed. It's not going to happen. That's what the Brahmins would do. So you go down the list and you can see whatever problem there is, the Brahmins would have nipped it in the bud before it even got off the ground. Okay, 2. The protection of cows maintains the most miraculous form of food, milk, for maintaining the brain, and of course, all the ingredients you need for yajna as well. The protection of women maintains their chastity, by which we get good generations of children for peace and progression of life. That's in the Gita. If women are not protected, then men will exploit them, and then you get all these kids born out of wedlock, or as John Lennon said, born over a bottle of liquor, a bottle of vodka on Saturday night. Most kids were conceived over a bottle of vodka on Saturday night. Hare Krishna. Wow. It's probably right. And if he's right, that's not good for society. So when you protect women, they're chaste. You maintain their chastity. Children are born because they're wanted. They're born into a family, a stable, functional family. That makes a big difference in society. Now, we're trying to preach Krishna consciousness, and those of us who are older devotees, we see a difference between the young people now and the young people of our generation. The young people now have more problems. There's more instability, for sure. The protection of children gives the human form of life a chance to prepare for liberty from material bondage, and the protection of old men gives them a chance to prepare themselves for life after death. So you can see that the protection is very, very spiritual, because you're protecting children. Why? Give them the opportunity to become Krishna conscious, educate them that way, and give elderly people the opportunity to prepare for going back to God and take care of them physically and in any other way, so you can facilitate that. So now I'm going to go to your questions or comments. I'm going to have to cut class a little short because where I'm staying at this retreat, we're having a Bhagavatam class. It starts at 8, and I don't want to be too late. Krishna Karshani says, so that we have to go back and remember what they're responding to. Maybe it's, normally I don't respond to you while I'm talking. Maybe I should, but then I lose my train of thought. So it means if a woman is temple president, she has to be under control of men, father, husband, son. How to understand it? Managing means making independent decisions. It means that sometimes she will run into difficulty dealing with men, and she'll ask her husband to deal with these men like she asked a man, and a man's like, I'm not going to do that. Why? Because I don't want to listen to a woman. That could be. Or the man is very difficult to deal with, and actually requires a man to deal with him because he's just, you're not going to be able to get anywhere. Or maybe in dealing with men, some men are flirting with you, so you need your husband around. It's like, get in the way between you and these guys. There could be many incidents. It doesn't mean you can't make independent decisions. It just means that, even a male temple president needs a lot of men to help him. So that's also just natural with a job. You need someone who can maintain the temple property. You need someone who can do the accounting and so forth. So that's a kind of protection that every temple president needs. But it will vary according to temple and according to woman, what she needs. And, I think a common problem may be, it may be difficult to deal with some men, and some men may be a little loose with her, and therefore having some protection by a man she could go to and say, can you deal with this, would be helpful, don't you think? Many women try to seduce men, so the women also have their part. Yes, yeah, if that's what they're trying to do. Maybe they're trying to prove that they're beautiful to themselves. Or maybe women have become so unchaste they can't control themselves. But the chastity, when women are unchaste, like I always said, men are always ready. Ladies, here's some information for you. Men are always ready for sex. Any time of the day, any time of the night, any time of the morning, they're ready. You say, devotee men? Well, hopefully not devotee men, but the point is, if you give men the chance, the opportunity, open the door, they're always ready. And you don't want to give that chance to any man, and you don't want to give that chance to a devotee man, because even though he's a devotee, he's not a pure devotee, and you don't want to open the door, because when you do, many devotee men have also not been able to control themselves. So the chastity valve in society is the women, because the men are always ready, even the men who are celibate. Watch out for the celibates. Why do I say watch out for the celibates? Well, celibate men, they haven't had sex in years. So that means, in one sense, they're even more ready. I know that sounds strange, because you would think, well, if they're celibate, they should be more purified. And that is the case for some, but it's not the case for all. Some of them are more ready because they're not doing it. So, ladies, beware in your dealings with men. And then the ladies say, but why should I have to be so concerned if these men are so weak? That's why you have to be concerned, because they're weak. Right? So, it's like if your husband's trying to stop smoking cigarettes, it would probably be a good idea you stop smoking, because he's weak, and if he sees you smoking, he'll smoke. And you'll say, well, he should just be stronger. I'm going to keep smoking. But he'll probably start smoking. He's not that strong. So it's something like that. Don't expect men to be strong. Just maintain your chastity. That's your job. And your father, your husband, your son, he's supposed to help protect your chastity. But you have to protect it yourself also, because you may not be protected by anyone. It's Kali Yuga, I think, let's see, Krishna Karshini says, I think many female devotees might be frustrated because they gave up association of non-devotees who wanted to take advantage of them, but still they had to deal with abusive men in our movement. Yeah, very frustrating. I was wondering how a single devotee woman can recognize potentially dangerous man who wants to bewilder her. Women tend to be a bit naive in this matter, especially when they have a strong desire to get married. Yeah, it's very easy. And we can write a song, and this will be one of the lines from the song. Maybe this will be the chorus. Don't believe every man who says, I love you. That's the best advice I can give you. Or something similar to I love you, like you are so beautiful, you are so wonderful, you are so this or that. Don't believe every man who says that. Some men who say it are sincere and they mean it. Some men who say it just want to have sex with you. And some men who say it think they're sincere and they don't even realize they're saying it just because they're physically attracted. Like sometimes we're not conscious of what's going on inside on the subtle level. And sometimes we deny it and we repress it, so we don't even know that we're saying, you're so beautiful, I love you, but ultimately the motive is just to enjoy sexually with that woman. And the man doesn't even realize it, sometimes. So, ladies, don't believe every man who says, I love you. Test him. This one devotee, she had a boyfriend, and when she became a devotee, he was very unhappy, and he wanted to stay with her. And I said, that's fine, you can stay with him. Just tell him you won't have any sex. And she said, but if I tell him that, he'll leave. And I say, well, that shows you how much he loves you. He loves having sex with you, but he doesn't love you. So that's why celibacy before marriage is so important. Because if a man's not willing to be celibate before marriage, then that means his love of you is love of sex with you. If he really loves you, he'll be happy to not have sex with you until you're married, until you can do it right, raise Krishna-conscious children, right? Now, if you're a bold, upfront woman, and a man says, I love you, you can ask him a question. Do you love me, or you just love my body? Do you love me, or is it actually you love having sex with me, or you love touching me, or you love, what do you love about me? And if I don't want to have sex, do you still love me? Those are good questions, I think. Maybe necessary questions. So Rafu says, lust destroyed my life since very, very young age. I'm not trained. Not trained is the reason of degradation of not only one individual, because people feel and see others, and they learn nonverbal and verbal. So one lusty man can affect many lives around, yeah. And it's true. I have the same experience being around lusty men who their whole life is like sex, and they want to get everyone involved in sex. They want to tell all their friends about it, and yeah. There's a statement in answering the question of how do you know a man is lusty. Well, there's a statement, I believe it's by Chanakya. He said, when in doubt, don't. Like sometimes you're thinking, should I do this or shouldn't I? Well, the fact that there's a doubt probably means there's good reason not to do it. So Chanakya is saying, when in doubt, don't. So I think the same thing could apply. If you sense that there's something impure coming from this man, you're probably right. And so if there's a doubt in his purity, go with the doubt and see where it takes you. I don't want to say take him to court and find him guilty without evidence, but at least you can go with that thought that it seems something's impure. I doubt that this person's motives are 100% pure. And so see where that doubt takes you, investigate. There's no harm. You're not condemning him for something he didn't do. You're just questioning and you're investigating. Prabhupada says, I think we need to train ourselves into the direction of protection. What must be protected, as you mentioned in Shastra, Srila Prabhupada. Target my spiritual teacher or teachers. Training must be done, otherwise we will not get hell, but something worse than hell. Wow. Well, training is everything, and just like we're learning in these classes about traditional culture, how people lived, who should be protected, who protects who, and we weren't raised to learn these things. I mean, some of these things do exist in society, but it's eroding. And so this is very, very important. And then a lot of times when you learn these things, then you look at yourself and you realize that I wish I would have learned these things when I was young, because pretty much what is being described in terms of what's wrong is me. And oh no, now what do I do? This is like a vivid description of myself as a man who's not protecting women, but who sees women more as objects of enjoyment than objects of protection. So what do? Well, now you know where you're off, and now you know what to do, and you get to work, and you start reforming, retraining yourself to see things differently and act differently. That's all you can do. And, I wanted to share something with you that this would be helpful in this discussion, but it's helpful in any discussion. My wife was giving a class on the 6 human needs, and the first human need is security. Security means to know things are, it's like a stability, to know that if I go to the temple, I won't get shot. If I eat prasadam, it's not poisoned. To know that if I work at this company, I'll get a paycheck. You just want to know that things will remain stable and secure. If I get married, I want to know my spouse won't leave me. If a company builds a house, I need to know it's not going to fall apart the next week. So that everybody needs. It's a human need. We can't, you need, when you get an airplane, you need to know that this airplane has been serviced, it's running, the pilots are qualified, and so on. If it was iffy, and this is, well, sometimes this airline uses planes that don't actually function, and sometimes they use pilots who aren't properly trained. You wouldn't fly on that plane. So you need security. And so I was thinking, the ultimate security for us is the holy name, because we know if we take shelter of the holy name, it will deliver us from material consciousness to spiritual consciousness. We know that 100%. So that's like our ultimate security is the holy name. And so if you have a problem, Rafa, you say, like I was raised in this environment where it's just whatever it was, sexuality, pornography from an early age, and now I feel kind of destroyed. But your security is in the holy name. The holy name can conquer any problem you have. And so it's a beautiful thought to know that if I take shelter of the holy name and I chant properly, without offense, then whatever obstacle I'm facing, eventually I'll be able to conquer it. And so that's such a beautiful thought, isn't it? And a beautiful meditation, that here's the ultimate security is in the holy name. That no matter what's going on, no matter what I am facing, what difficulty I'm facing, and no matter what I'm trying to achieve, if I take shelter of the holy name, I'll be able to achieve it, or I'll be able to overcome that anartha. And it's true. And it's nice to meditate like that when you're chanting, to think like that, to feel like that if I take shelter properly of the holy name, whatever it is I want to achieve, whatever it is I'm trying to conquer, it will happen. And I think part of the problem is we don't believe that, or we don't think like that, and then we don't chant good rounds, because we don't think the holy name could, or I'm too fallen, the holy name can't help me, or whatever stupid thought we have, or I can't chant properly, or I don't care, or whatever. But if you realize whatever it is you're dealing with, the holy name will help you overcome it, then your chanting is much, much better, because you feel like this security and confidence in the holy name. Just have to keep chanting without offense, and all my spiritual desires will be fulfilled. Isn't that a nice thought? I think it's a nice thought. At least it, personally for me, it's very powerful. Going to give class this afternoon, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, so if you want to tune in. They said 6:15, but 6:15 in ISKCON time, I don't trust it. So I said 6:30, we might start 6:25. If you're online, then you'll see. But you can advertise 6:30. That's a Sunday feast in Montreal. In English, because I don't think I could give a class in French. That would be difficult. I could fake it, but I don't know if anyone would understand it. How to know that the man really loves us? Test him. If you really love me, where's the car? If you really love me, where's the house? If you really love me, where are the kids? If you really love me, wash the dishes. You have to test him. You have to be smart enough to test him in a nice way, Because, there's this saying, a beautiful saying I love. It said, love is not a verb. Love is not a noun. It's a verb. Is that right? It's an action, Love is an action. If I say, I feel love, love becomes a noun. But if I'm doing something that shows I love you, then it's a verb. Oh, there's this saying, love is what love does. What does that mean? It means, how do you know someone loves you? Just look at them, see what they do. How do they treat you? Do they respect you? Do they respect you, or are they trying to control you? Do they appreciate you, or are they trying to criticize you? I mean, if you love somebody, why would you be criticizing them? Why would you denigrate them? Why would you put them down? You'd appreciate them. You'd want to help them. You want to make them happy. So if you see that this man is honoring you, appreciating you, respecting you, trying to make you happy, concerned about you, can listen to you, then, those are all symptoms of love. Symptom of control is putting you down. Like, we go out to a restaurant to eat, not that devotees do this, but an example. You go out to a restaurant to eat, and then you tell your wife or your girlfriend, this is what you're going to eat. Eat this, it's good for you. Well, I don't like it. Well, just eat it, it's good for you. And then you order it for her. Have you ever seen that? Well, someone just told me that she was with somebody, and that's what he did. So, little signs, like control freak, And I think the other problem is, at least this is something I've realized, that probably you've realized it also, that a lot of us don't even know how to love. We don't even know what it is. We're very selfish. And the longer you have lived alone, unmarried, tendency to be more selfish. Selfish in the sense that you don't have to consider another person. Not that you're necessarily a selfish person, but you never had to consider anybody else. because you were single. And so sometimes it's hard once you get married because you've never had to consider you just do what you want. It doesn't affect anybody. Now it affects another person and you're just not used to that. So sometimes people are not bad and they can love, but they just don't know how because they haven't had to, because they're alone. They haven't had to serve anybody. And you might say, but they serve their guru very nicely. But that's their guru. That doesn't mean they're going to serve you nicely. It doesn't. There's not this equation, well, he's such a humble servant of his guru. It doesn't mean he's going to be a humble servant of you or she's going to be a humble servant of you necessarily. It may, but it may not. I don't want to guarantee it. Because we are not pure devotees, we cannot expect a devotee man to be completely out of bodily conception. They may love women, but also feel attraction to the look of the woman. We're not 100% spiritual yet. Yeah, but okay, we're not 100% spiritual, but you want to get the spiritual side more than 50%. At least you want to have a chance that the man is 51% Krishna conscious and 49% lusty. Not 51% lusty and 49% Krishna conscious. So the more Krishna conscious, the better. Obviously, you don't expect him to be perfect, but you expect him to be sufficiently Krishna conscious, sufficiently controlled, right? So I think that's true in so many aspects of our lives. We're conditioned, but part of conditioning also means how well do you control that conditioning. So, all right, maybe I'm 51% Krishna conscious and 49% lusty or greedy or envious, whatever. So then my question would be, or what I would suggest observing, if you observe that's the case, well, this man doesn't seem that Krishna conscious. A little more Krishna conscious than materialistic consciousness, but how well does he deal with that material side? How well does he control it? That's important also. So maybe he's not so spiritually evolved, but he's able to control it. And that's important. Yes? So now, it looks like we've come to the end of the line, unless you have some other questions. But, also at the same time, if you see a man is lacking in some way or a woman is lacking in some way, you don't want to condemn them, you also want to try to help them. You say, I notice, it seems like you're struggling with this. Is there anything I can do with you? Like I have a godbrother, and he often tells me, I should really do this or I should really do that. And he often doesn't do it. So he probably needs help from somebody who can help him do it. So, if your spouse says, I really should be doing this, and you see they're not doing it, then there's two ways you can deal with it. You can condemn them. You always say you're going to do this, but you never do. What's wrong with you? You're so weak. That's one way of dealing with it, which of course only degrades the marriage and doesn't help anybody. Or the other way of dealing with it is, what can I do to help you? Or perhaps this would help. Or I got you this book, I think this will help you. So, that's a proper attitude, right? So, I think a lot of women or men, they'll look at the defects or frailties of their spouse and they'll be very much in a mood of condemnation mood, instead of a mood of, well, let me help you with this. Let's see how we can help you. So that's important also. Your spouse isn't going to be perfect. And if you expect him to be perfect, don't get married. Or her to be perfect, don't get married. Because you won't find a perfect person more perfect than Krishna. Or even close to Krishna. And so, you say, I wish my husband would be like this devotee. Well, if you got to know that devotee, you would see he has so many problems and so many faults also. So how about the mood of helping when you see a fault? How can I help? How can I be an assistant? Because if you condemn and you complain and you just get upset, then that's not good. Condemning, complaining, getting upset, do that before you get married, because maybe you shouldn't be married. And better you see all the problems before. And if you can't accept all those problems, better not get married. And if you see the problems before and you can deal with it and accept it and help the person, then fine, go ahead. And then you can't complain because you knew exactly what you were getting into. But if you don't see all the problems or deal with them and then you get married and deal with it later, that's your fault. You should have dealt with it in the beginning. But once you get married, then you try to help the person. I can't say the person will always be helped. I can't say the person will always want the help. In many cases, they don't want it. In many cases, even if they're open to it, they don't really try to improve. That's unfortunate. But at least from our perspective as a spouse, we should be more in the mood of, well, let me see how I can help. And another thing also, not only helping, but also understanding. Like sometimes we want to condemn our partner for their behavior. We think that this behavior is disrespectful, or in some other way that behavior is bad, when it may just be normal. Like a man comes home from work and he's like very stressed out, he had a bad day. And he comes home and his wife wants to talk to him and he just doesn't want to talk. And she thinks, this guy's a bum. This guy's a bum. I'm going to dump him. He comes home from work. I haven't seen one another all day. And he's so distant. Like there's something wrong with him. I could never live with a person like that. Well, the problem is maybe there is nothing wrong with him and there's everything wrong with you. You don't understand that when a man is fried and frazzled and burned out from work, he just needs to be alone for like 15 minutes when he gets home, and then he'll be fine. So, sometimes you may condemn somebody just because you don't understand how their mind works or how their heart works, or vice versa. A man may condemn a woman for certain behaviors just because he doesn't understand that's how women deal with this particular situation, or that's how his wife deals with it. But there's actually nothing wrong with her, that's just how she deals with it. So I think that's important also. So instead of jumping to conclusions about the behavior of men or women, we should also understand something about general behaviors of men and women, because maybe when you're condemning someone, actually what they're doing is just normal. That's just how women or men process situations, or maybe they're going through some difficulty and you don't know what the difficulty is and you need to find out. So being supportive is very important before you condemn. Now, obviously, there are condemnable activities, and some people are very consistent in condemnable activities, and those kinds of people do not make good spouses. And that should be recognized, of course. All I'm saying is don't condemn something. Condemn someone for something that just may be normal behavior for a man or a woman, right? And don't condemn them without seeing if you can help them. Is there any, you seem so stressed out and you're always upset with me. Is there anything I can do to help this? What's going on? So, maybe you can do something and that it solves the problem. And then once the problem is solved, they're not criticizing you anymore because the stress is gone. So, you understand what I'm saying? You want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. But sometimes, well, this is what I see, sometimes two people have good chemistry and they like one another, but there's some huge dysfunctions in the part of either person, not their fault, it's just that's the way they are. And these dysfunctions, in my estimation, are going to be huge problems in their marriage if they don't do something about it. And they don't know because they like one another. And then they find out after they're married that my spouse has this, was traumatized in his last marriage or traumatized as a kid, and he's acting in very strange ways, which is making it really difficult for me. So those things need to be investigated before marriage. And if you are getting married or you are married and you realize you have some trauma, some idiosyncrasy, some very strange way of responding to difficulty, then it's your responsibility out of service to your spouse to deal with it. I was talking to a devotee and he was describing something that happened. And he said after it happened, he said, I just left the temple and moved away and had nothing to do with the temple. And I said, that's interesting. And then I said, when you face difficulties, do do you often just leave the situation, just walk out of the situation? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, I want to tell you something. This is your way. This is how you respond to difficulty. You just delete everyone and everything and just leave. And he said, yeah, that's true. So it's good to understand that about yourself, because if you're in a relationship, and I said, is that how you deal with it? And he said, he was married before. He said, yeah, whenever I had a fight with my wife, that's what I would do. I would just say, okay, I'm going, I'm leaving, I don't need you. That's his dysfunctional way of dealing with a difficulty. And all of us have ways we deal with difficulty. The problem is some of us have dysfunctional ways of dealing with difficulty. Now ask yourself, when there's difficulty, when there's stress, if I'm in a situation that's problematic, how do I deal with it? And there'll be different possible ways you deal with it. Some of you will just stand back and think about it. You'll look at your responses, what's going on in your mind. You'll say, I need to think about this for a few days before I respond. Some of you, like this devotee, will just delete or run away. Some will just hide. Some will go into depression. Some will fight. Some will yell. Some will do nothing. And if you think about it, probably, most likely, whenever you face a challenge, a difficulty, you respond in the same way to every challenge and difficulty, which is great if your response solves the problem and your response doesn't drive other people crazy. But if your response does not solve the problem well or drives other people crazy, then it's your responsibility, if you want to be in a relationship and you just want to live a normal, functional life, to develop strategies which are not dysfunctional. That's out of respect to your spouse. So let's say whenever something upsets you, you just go on a tirade and you just give a lecture to your spouse for like a half an hour, and they're sitting there like a whirlwind is flashing in their face, and you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that, you did this, That's just the way you deal with difficulties. You just talk and scream and yell and put other people down. So if that's what you do think that's nice for your spouse? You think they like that? Of course they don't. So you should be considerate enough to realize that, oh, this is a very, very bad way to deal with a difficulty. When I'm in stress, this is what I do. And I just drive my spouse crazy, or I drive people at work crazy, or even drive my guru crazy. Shruti Kirti was here, and I said, Shruti Kirti, can you tell me stories where people were defying Prabhupada, his own disciples were arguing with him? And he goes, yeah, I've seen it. You can imagine. I said, I mean, like where they're arguing? He said, yeah, they were yelling. Prabhupada was yelling and the disciple was yelling. Could you imagine that? So we even have dysfunctional ways, some of us, of responding to difficulty with our own guru. Oh my God. I mean, shouldn't we be aware of this? Shouldn't we do something? Shouldn't we understand our style of response? You know, I told that story on 9/11. There was a seminar with like 5,000 people, and the leader of the seminar said when he made the announcement, he saw a variety of different reactions, from people being aggressive and screaming to people just internalizing and turning off, to people going into depression and sadness, to people saying we need to do something, not being angry, but just we need to do something, to people discussing the problem and the causes. Completely different reactions to the same problem. And so he made the point, we all have a certain way that we react to problems. And even with Srila Prabhupada, some people whose reaction is to get angry, they got angry with Prabhupada. Could you imagine? Isn't that insane? So we have to be really careful that if we have a dysfunctional style of responding to difficulty, it could be extremely destructive to relationships, and it can be extremely destructive to your marital relationship, because you don't know how to, in a sattvic way, respond to a problem in a way that creates a closer relationship rather than destroys it. And then what to speak of your relationship with your guru. Now, I am a guru, so I know. I've been on the receiving end of so-called disciples who don't know how to respond to difficulties and stress. Some of them don't know how to respond to instructions their guru gives them that they don't like. And they start, I don't want to say what they do, but it's bad. You know that saying, a bad workman blames his tools? So you've seen people blame the tools, right? Haven't you? Not blame himself, blame the tools. That instruction, he shouldn't have given me that. It was the wrong instruction. It wasn't the wrong instruction, it was the perfect instruction. That was the instruction. Why are you so angry? He should have given me this instruction, not that instruction. So you're blaming the tools. It has nothing to do with me. I'm a very advanced devotee, and he should have just known that was the wrong instruction. No. You have to realize you have a nature, when you don't hear what you like, you get upset. A lot of us are like that. We need to hear certain things from people we respect. And if they don't say certain things, we get angry. We start faulting them. That's our style of responding to something that's difficult. And then you get married and you haven't resolved that. It becomes hell for your spouse. You're having an argument and you just run off into your room and lock the door. And you're like, we were talking. I don't want to talk. It's like, how fair is that? How good is that for the relationship? No, but what we're talking about is important. I don't want to talk about it. That's how you respond to difficulty. You shut down. You understand? So, this is, I think, when I see people and say, can you find me a husband or a wife? And I look at them and I think, I don't tell them this. I say, I would never find you a husband and wife. You're so dysfunctional. The only husband and wife I would find you is somebody I hate and I want to get back at, and I'll tell you, marry them, because you will make them so miserable. And I can laugh and go, ha ha ha, I got back at you. Of course, I wouldn't do that, but you know what I'm saying. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's saying, can you find me a husband and wife? And you look at them and say, you are so dysfunctional. I could never, in all earnestness and honesty and integrity, recommend anyone for you. You have to work on your stuff, because if you don't, no matter how compatible you are, so-called compatible, you're going to drive this person nutty, because you don't know how to functionally respond to stress, to anxiety, to difficulty. Some people don't even know how to function when people don't agree with them. I've been seeing this lately. It's very interesting. Perhaps you've seen it. When someone doesn't agree with you, or maybe not you, but someone doesn't agree with someone, they turn off. They just don't like that person. It becomes the relationship just goes very sour immediately. Have you ever seen that? Like someone doesn't agree with another person and you see it in their physiology, you see it in their face, everything changes. And I was thinking of this morning. I was thinking of 3 devotees that have these amazingly good relationships, like really sweet, but only with people who 100% agree with them. And they have horrible relationships. Actually, I wouldn't say horrible. They can't have a relationship with people who don't agree with them. And when people don't agree with them, they fight. They attack. They don't just sit back and discuss the disagreement. How could you believe this? That is so stupid. What's wrong with you? That's how they respond to someone who doesn't agree with them. Have you met people like that? Have you seen that? It's very interesting. If you agree with them, they are so warm with you. They are so close and loving. And if you don't, it's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They turn on you. Isn't that interesting? So they have a dysfunctional way of responding to people who don't agree with them. They attack because they always have to be right, because they know everything. And they just can't function in an environment where they're not 100% right. And they will attack to get you to agree with them, because they can't function unless everybody agrees with them. Wow, don't marry that one. Fortunately, a lot of those don't get married. They remain celibate, which is good, because the only people who have to deal with them are the poor brahmacharis in the ashram, but probably they can avoid them a lot. But in a marriage, wow, that is difficult. So anyway, I have to go now, but I think I'm just sharing some thoughts recently of what I was seeing. And in fact, this morning I was thinking about 3 people who attack if you don't agree with them. And as long as you agree with them, they're amazing. They're like the best people. They're like the nicest people if you just agree with them. But if you don't, they will attack you. They will throw you out the door. First they'll attack you to get you to agree, but then if you don't agree, they will not like you. They will not deal with you. They don't want anything to do with you. They don't want to look at you. And I'm sure they're out there telling everybody how bad you are. So the point of this discussion was just to show that we all have different ways of responding to situations which we don't like, which are uncomfortable, we don't agree with, etc. And if you have dysfunctional ways of responding to these things, you're going to have dysfunctional relationships. And you shouldn't get married until you deal with that, until you can respond in a mature and sober way to difficulty. Because it's completely unfair to the people in your life, and it's unfair to yourself, and you're not going to have a highly functional relationship. And this is true of management. How many of you have you ever seen leaders that don't actually know how to have relationships with people who don't agree with them? How can you run an organization if you're like, the dictator and everyone has to agree with you? What happens? So many people will leave. And how can your organization grow if you can't listen to people who disagree with you? They may have better ideas than you. You're not necessarily the smartest guy in the company. The smartest guy in the company, the smartest CEO, is the one who listens to other smart people. That's the smart one, not the one who tells everybody, I know more than you. That guy is stupid. He may be smart, he may have a high IQ, but ultimately he's stupid. Because the smartest one will listen. Even to the people that have the lower IQ, that don't have the 10 PhDs like him, they'll listen because they'll know everybody has some value and everybody can potentially could make a contribution. So that's my experience. So I think this is like exceedingly important for us to understand, especially for those who are going to enter marriage. And I can say honestly, there's so many people that say, can you find a husband and wife? I don't say anything because I don't want to make them feel bad, but I just kind of, and I think in my mind, there's no way I would ever get you married in your present state. I mean, sometimes I will, if I have a relationship, I can tell them why, but generally I just don't say anything. I said, you are in such illusion to think that you're qualified to be married right now when you have certain issues that you're not even aware of, or you're aware of and you're not dealing with it, that is going to create huge problems in your relationship if you don't deal with it. And we see that. So I have to go because we're having class, but thank you for listening, and then we'll see you tonight around 6:30. And then Hare Krishna to all of you. I hope this helps you. And I would just ask you to meditate on what is your style of reacting to stress and difficulties and people who disagree with you, etc. And if you find that style not to be fully sattvic, we'll just use the word sattvic. And if it's sattvic, it's going to be healthy, and it's going to create better relationships, and it's going to be better for you. You will grow the way you respond. And if it's not healthy, then start thinking what you can do to make it healthy, and start thinking why it is not healthy. Why am I responding this way? And I'll give you a hint, and this is just a question you can ask yourself. If you think of your response, this is my response style. I just hide, or I cry, or I fight, or I scream. Ask yourself, did you do that as a kid? And I would venture to guess that the answer for most of you will be yes. That was my response to difficulty as a kid, and it hasn't changed. And now I'm 60 years old or 40 years old, and I'm still doing it. That is very common. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So you can ask yourself, you can look at your style and then ask yourself, is this how I've always responded? And there's a good chance the answer is yes, that we're still responding with the same immaturity we had as a child. I'm not saying this to put anybody down. I'm just stating a fact that this is true for many people. So it's something you can consider. Okay? Hare Krishna. We will see you next Saturday No, we'll see you tonight if you want to come. It's 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, and otherwise we'll see you next Saturday at 8 o'clock. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.